By the end of the last lecture, I said that we should only update state using the setter function. But don't just trust me on that. So instead, let's actually explore this and break React. So just to see what happens when we try to update state manually. Now, right now we have this step state here defined as a const variable. And so we would not be able to even change it. So let's change this to a let. And so then we can actually break this. So let's say that here in handle next, instead of updating the state in the correct way, we would do it like this. So step equal step plus 1. That would be a perfectly normal way of updating a variable defined with let, right? And so right now, this is a let variable, so a variable that we can update. And so again, this would be a perfectly normal way of updating variables in JavaScript. But let's see what now happens when we click this button. Well, simply nothing happens. So we don't get any error from React, but simply nothing happens. And so the reason for that is that React has no way of knowing that this is actually trying to update the state. So React has no magic way of knowing that this here is the state variable and that this operation is basically updating it. So again, React doesn't know about that. And that's why React provided us with this setter function here, which is a functional way of updating the state value, but without mutating it. Because here we are directly mutating now this step variable, right? But React is all about immutability. And so therefore, we can only update the state using the tools that React gives us. So in this case, this set step function. And so this setter function is actually tied to this state variable right here. So when we use this functional way of updating the state, then React does know that this is the state variable that should be updated. Okay, so never do this mistake. Just always use const and always use the setter function. Okay. Now another way in which this could happen, which might be a little bit less obvious, is when we use an object or an array for state. So let's just do a quick experiment here. So let's just say test, for example, and then use state. And here as a default, we pass in an object. And let's give it some property of name. Now notice that here in the destructuring, I only took out the state variable itself. So I don't even have the setter function now. And so here, let's say that I wanted to update this name. Well, let's first actually also print it here. So test.name. So then we get Jonas there. And then here we might think that this is how we update that state. So test.name. And now let's use Fred, for example. So just some other name. And yeah, watch what happens when I click next now. And that did actually work. So mutating the object like this did actually trigger a new re-render of the component view. However, mutating objects like this is a really, really bad practice. So React really doesn't want you to do this. And that's because sometimes in more complex situations, this actually won't work. And in general, it's really just a bad practice of mutating objects like this, especially in a framework like React, which is all about immutability and functional state updates. So never do this. So if you really wanted to update this object here, we would again create a setter function here. So not creating, but basically taking this setter function out of the result of useState. And then here we would call that setter function and then pass in the complete new object. So the name should now be Fred. So it's back to what we had before now. And now if we click next, that still updates the name to Fred, but it does so in the correct way. So always treat state as immutable in React. So as something that you cannot change directly, but that you can only change using the tools that React gives us. So using the state setter function.